Thanks, Paul. Well, I've got a couple of things to update. I'm not actually working in communications anymore, so that's changed. And I also looked at what I was supposed to be talking about in the agenda and realised that when I'd put down some thoughts that I'd been quite comprehensive. So I'm a little bit nervous. I've got to solve everything, including world peace, I think, in this presentation. But what I'm actually going to try and do is just talk about some specific examples from within Janssen. We've actually changed our name. We're now no longer Cilag, it's just Janssen. And before I start, though, I'd like to just raise one thing, which is to why I'm here speaking like this and why we bother, really, in the sense that anyone that comes from a pharmaceutical company will know it's a fine line that we tread with regard to being open, transparent, sharing things that are valuable, but also, on the other hand, protecting the business and not sharing something that would be damaging to the business in any way or give things away which could be a competitive advantage. So I hope you appreciate that. I'm trying to be transparent. And I will try and answer any questions that you have, but there may be things that I can't necessarily answer. Anyway, with that caveat, I'll move on. Okay, so if you want to find me online, you can do. I do speak for myself today, but obviously I'm a representative of Janssen, so I don't think it's possible to really split the two. And my opinions aren't necessarily those of my company or anyone else, actually, as I've often find. So, it seems that most people now throw quotes and that into presentations, and I've done the same. And this quote I found out the other day was actually Steve Jobs' favourite quote, so I apologise for that. But I think this is important, and not really from the outside. I'm not suggesting that you need to be some kind of world visionary with regard to sociological matters or technology, or put yourself up as being someone like Brian Solis, who I'll talk about in a bit, as being a world expert on social media. But it is important to be able to understand things within a pharma company, if you work in this role, a little bit quicker than some of the people that maybe work in other functions and it's not their job to do that. And for us, when we started to get into things like Twitter and that, which is not, we weren't the first, although obviously J&J in the US have been active in this space for a long time. It was difficult for people within the business sometimes to understand what that might mean in the future. But I think things have moved on so much in the last year that it's starting to become real for people. And so I've just put this slide in to say that I was at a meeting yesterday where I was speaking at, and someone was talking about how pharma is, with regard to reputation, a little bit above tobacco, I think it was, and just below oil. Whether that's switched around now, I don't know. I'm a little bit dubious about some of that. I'm not so sure that pharma is seen necessarily always in that very low context. But there's no point in denying that there is a reputational issue. And therefore, this is a massive opportunity for us, I think, to try and be more open and have an open dialogue and try and build that trust we have with the industry. I think most people, with the public, should I say, I think you can see here, obviously, that with the Edelman survey, that around half the people trust pharmaceutical companies, whatever trust means, I suppose. So just very briefly to say, we talked to someone asked the question about ROI. I think we're moving really to very much a kind of post-advertising age where people accept that people don't want to receive messages in the same way that they did, whereas communications have always been absolutely key to any successful business. Now communication is very much driven by conversation. And actually that it's about respect for the people that you're actually trying to help. If you're not in this space, the conversations are going to happen anyway. But on top of that, it's also, like we already said, important to understand that social media is one component of an integrated strategy. And even though my job title is now digital, I forget what it is sometimes, digital strategy and social media, which is a mouthful, going forward, I don't think it's going to be viable to have separate parts of the business. And really my role is to try and work cross-functions across the business, into EMEA, to link in, if possible, if needed, with global, and actually facilitate and enable across the business, not about separating digital or social media from the other parts of what we do. So Sabina's spoken about Roche's social media principles, and for about a year and a half I've been working on, with the business, not just me alone, how we're going to talk to the public about what we do in social media. Why we're there, what we're trying to achieve, and how this fits in with our values. So the intention is to publish, and it isn't published yet. And like I said before, the idea here is to be open with you guys before it actually happens. A charter which will explain to the public what we're in the space for, what we're trying to achieve, what we can't do, and also try and educate the public not just about our business itself, but also the industry in general. So to just pick out a few specifics that we think will be in there, I can't say for exactly, but this is basically what will be there, we think, which is that J&J have a credo, but every single pharmaceutical company that I hear about talks about their responsibility to communities, and I think it's time we moved on from talking about should people be in social media. Our communities are no longer just around the factory or people that take our medications. Our communities are on numerous platforms that we can talk about, and really it's a responsibility of pharmaceutical companies to be there, to be engaged, to answer questions if they're there. Underneath that though, I think it's important to say that any social media engagement undertaken by a pharma company will be imperfect. But I would say that any social media engagement is imperfect. There's no such thing as perfect social media. There's no such thing as a perfect interaction. Everyone has their own agenda. Everyone has something that they bring to it, which colours in some way what they have to say or how it's moderated or what the thrust of that social media platform is. So we have conflicting obligations with regard to legal and regulatory, with regard to conflicts within our own business about what we're trying to achieve. But that's fine because we also have some very positive things that we have resource. We can provide balanced information. We in a sense have to do that because of the regulatory environment. We can provide tools and we can become part of a much broader conversation. So we really just very quickly want to help people to better understand our company and the broader industry, like I said, access assets that we've developed or maybe third parties have developed that could be useful for people in managing their health. But with the very last point, the caveat that people should always be allowed, where possible, to share their comments and their opinions. But if you ask someone their opinion, you've got to be prepared to listen to it. So, and that for me is a big thing with regard to the internal processes, that it's all very well to say that we're listening, we want questions, and where possible, because obviously we work in complex, large organisations, we should be able to answer that. So I'm going to talk about two campaigns. One of them is launched and is going to go into much more detail by Gary Monk tomorrow, who was in charge of the ADHD YouTube campaign, so I won't speak much about that. But just briefly talk about why we use social media, what we wanted to achieve, and touch upon how we measure it. The first thing to say is that, I think it was again discussed in the last session about return on investment. It's kind of, in a way, it's old news now. It's internal with regard to how you want to particularly measure the value that you're getting from these channels. But you can measure social media and value conversions within social media and therefore some offline behaviour very easily. And I see this quote quite a lot, trying to suggest in some ways that if you can't measure it, that's okay. But the truth of the matter is that there's hundreds of different things that you can measure in social media, just reeling some off. This slide didn't take very long. The trouble is that we're often data rich but insight poor. So, to just build this, because the two things I want to speak about are, first of all, ADHD, and as I said, I really will be brief on this. The thing I want to say is that the value is obviously in the YouTube video itself, about what the messages we're trying to communicate, how we're going to try and become part of the sometimes very contentious discussion on ADHD. But underneath that, there's things that we're trying to measure that people do. We hope people will access resources that will help them better manage the condition with their child. Maybe they're a teacher and they're looking for some kind of resource to help them manage children that they teach. We have those things available already, and this is a good way not only of trying to spark a debate, but also drive people, if that's the right word, to resources that they might find useful. And we can measure that, and that to us is a value. A campaign that I was hoping would be launched by today, but is slightly delayed, although approved, is a fully integrated campaign for psoriasis. And it's worth saying for this that I completely agree that in order to tick boxes to show that you've got Facebook, that you've got YouTube, you're doing Twitter, it's not really about that. With psoriasis, it's a very specific case where we felt we could really add some value. Where people who have psoriasis often don't know how severe they are. They find it difficult sometimes to navigate through the healthcare system. They often don't know the impact that it's having on their lives, and they've lived with it and kind of been brave with it, as the term's often used, for their entire life. So there's good stuff out there already, and patient advocacy and other people are providing some good information. But we definitely felt there was a space where we could ourselves go in there, try and develop a community with the principles that I said that we won't be perfect, try and offer high quality information and tools to help people manage their psoriasis better. So the way that this will look is that we will have a Facebook page. obviously with comments, but in case someone was to ask that, where we hope to develop something of a community. It will be a learning experience for us as a business because obviously Facebook has its own etiquette and we're going to try and follow that. We also have a Twitter page to help curate some of the information that we have as well, and also to look outwards a little bit at external news. A channel, but not really a YouTube channel to put our own videos, although we will put some. It's actually, we want people to upload their own thoughts and feelings. And of course, you know, with mobile health, the applications and that, but the application's very much focused around something that might be useful either for a clinician or for a patient. And this is some of the ideas. So what we're trying to do really is to focus our efforts now in integrating this as well with other representatives of the company, and also sharing this information and being collaborative with patient organisations where we possibly can. Oops. This is the clunkiest. So this is to give you an idea. So that is Facebook, and I know that I might get some questions about that afterwards, which I'm happy to answer. But I was going to go on to Twitter, and again, I heard that Roche have obviously got a fantastic Twitter account. J&J do themselves in the US. Most companies now are on Twitter. And there's a lot of talk about followers. I think everyone understands that it's not so much about the number of followers that you have, really, as about the kind of engagement you get and the type of followers that you have. So with that in mind, I've put together quite a crass table, which I've missed people out from, including GSK by mistake. But it's not meant to be a universal thing. It's just to give the idea that people do want to follow pharmaceutical companies, it seems. The challenge that I had internally when I first started to do Twitter was who was going to follow and why. Is it self-interested groups? Are we really going to reach out to the general public? Is this really going to make a difference? And that's something I didn't know, especially considering that within the UK, we really very much wanted to be externally focused, talking about broad healthcare news, occasionally putting things in from ourselves if we have it, based very much around the community aspect and patient support and disease awareness. So what I decided to do after about 6 months was really look in a bit more detail at the kind of people that were following the account, although I tried to keep up to date as it went along. And so at the top left is a cloud of the things that I speak about. So you can see they're pretty obvious topics for a UK-based Twitter account. And the tweet sheet below is obviously a collation of the bios, I think actually it uses, of the people that follow the account. So it seems that, in a very crude measure, that people are kind of aligned with what we're talking about with regard to at least health is the big word there. Not something else. Obviously you can see there is communications and the rest of it. But I wanted to get a little bit further under the skin of that. And one of the radical changes that's happened within pharmaceutical companies, and there's many because of this, is the idea about how you research, how you understand the community that you're trying to speak to. And this really, it wouldn't have happened, I don't think, 2 years ago, where we just sent out a very quick, completely unscientific survey monkey link to the people that follow the account and said, look, just tell us what you think. It's no more, no less than that. But we did get some really interesting results, or I found them interesting. Now, as I said, this is not meant to be scientific. So, you can pull holes in this if people want to. And when internally the idea was that doesn't matter, because it's just to get an idea of what people say. So when we asked people who they said they would be or how they would place themselves, most people said they were members of the public. And then you've got a smattering right through of creative agencies and patient advocacy, and 10% of healthcare professionals as well. So we found that quite interesting. It seems to match up with what we thought from just looking at the followers anyway, but that was interesting. And even if that isn't a fair reflection of who follows the account, it's a fair reflection of who was engaged over that 2-day period. So we asked a very open, difficult question, which is, do you trust information that you get from pharmaceutical companies? I think in a way, it's a bit of a non-question because it depends, doesn't it, on so many things. Do you trust Facebook? Well, no. But do you trust the people you're friends with or groups you follow? Then, yeah, possibly. But it was still interesting to say that over half the people didn't trust it, and 3/4 if you add in people that were neutral.